Want to welcome everybody again to our virtual version of the INTERPHEX Live. As everybody knows that seek this out, this is the version that we usually conduct on a stage in the Crystal Palace at the Javits Center. That's really neat. But things being as they may, here we are, and thanks to the efforts of Reed, INTERPHEX, we continue on with the valuable information that we do discuss during this time, only it's virtual. And having said that, I have the pleasure of being with one of our regular panelists, Annette Kreuger. She is the Vice President of Global Research and Development in the Pharma and the Biotech industry for Industrial Information Resources. And she is a wealth and a font of information. And just for a reference, this is usually the discussion that packs the house. We have a couple of them. So why don't we just get started? So Annette, I mean, usually we start with where we've been. Well, we know where we've been and why don't we kind of put it in perspective from your standpoint? So what is up with the industry here?
Well, I'll tell you, these, as the old saying goes, these are interesting times that we're living in. The industry was already strong before there was even a hint of COVID. I noticed an uptick across the globe in project activity, new builds, expansions. I mean, some enormous projects going on. And then COVID came and just blew everything up. But everybody said, well, there's so much growth because of COVID. But I have to underline that there was already a huge growth spur going on before there was even a hint that it was actually a viable pandemic that was going to spur all this other development.
So let's get a little more specific. So what areas and what areas were you seeing the growth? I mean, was it across the board? Was it big molecule, small molecule? Where?
Well, here's what's an interesting parallel. When all of the COVID project announcements came out, BARDA and Project Warp Speed, and we're chasing all of this. You got to chase the money. 80% easily already were at sites that had either recently expanded or were in the process of major expansion programs already. And those were all biological. They were either for bulk biologicals, fill and finish. And it was very interesting. That was without fail. I mean, not to say we've already reported, I mean, almost 8 billion in, 4 billion in directly related to COVID projects, but there was so much already under construction. And it was like if you took an overlay map and let's go to Moderna. Well, Moderna just completed a $100 million expansion. They just finished it. Now they're going to do some more a little bit. Pfizer, well, in Kalamazoo, $500 million being invested there, but it had already started construction before COVID was on the radar. And interestingly enough, they were all prepped for one component of the biological manufacturing process, right from development all the way to the fill and finish and packaging. And that was the biggest growth that we were seeing everywhere. And it was just an interesting parallel there that I was rather surprised.
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, as a industry fellow myself, although I don't track all the detailed businesses, looks like cell and gene has been going like a house on fire here. A lot of people jumping on the bandwagon here. So I imagine that was all underway before this got started, right?
Yes, and it's strange because in many ways, what we're seeing, if we get off of strictly like there's drugs, and then of course the PPE equipment and all of that part of the industry. When you look at it as a whole, in some cases, it was just a matter of expanding to a 24/7 shift, utilizing the capacity they already had in place, or a minor retooling. And I'm not saying there's no investment from it and that there won't be continued investment, but much of it was already underway. You know, you could name off any of them: AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Moderna, Celgene, Catalent, the CMOs, Lonza, Emergent. They all had projects going on already. If they weren't underway, they were planned, and most of them were already reported. We're still getting more, but the big base of it, and what I think that is from, is perhaps that's why they were targeted, because they could ramp up. And what they're going to get after this is a lot of these huge projects that were started paid for, because they're not all going to end up making vaccines, not for a global vaccine. But
Well, I get it, but let's ask the obvious question then. I mean, everybody's talking about what a horror story the pandemic is, and it is in most cases. But you know, what did get derailed? I mean, there's got to be. Did anything come to a grinding halt? I mean, or did this just accelerate?
we had about 8 billion to date in projects that were impacted. That's how we're choosing to refer to it. Impacted by COVID. Some of them are already restarting, because what happened, there was no universal plan. You could go from city to city, county to county, state to state. You can go to work here, but you can't go to work here. And so some jobs were completely shut down, or they were open, but then the GC can't get the subs on. It really caused a lot of chaos. We're seeing, before this latest wave, or the continuation of the first one, they're back to work. These projects are moving forward. Like I said, there's 8 billion were impacted. I would say less than 10% of those would be permanently impacted. And I'll tell you, those REITs are going gangbusters. Alexandria Real Estate Investment Trust and Biomed, they can't build these projects fast enough, and pulling these permits to build these huge research centers all over the country.
So, actually, I think so. The long-term impact is going to be ongoing and continued growth of an industry that was already strong before we started.
Absolutely. Because this is all going to play into, you know, Russ, every year we talk about price controls.
Yeah.
This is a perfect storm for the industry. It's a perfect storm, because they can get rid of, they don't care about generics. They did, but they don't. They're going to give up that. They're going to give up the vaccines. And what they're going to be left for is leave our high-priced advanced biologicals alone. And you haven't heard a whisper about price controls in the United States. There was some problem when they were talking about Gilead's drug for treatment, the therapeutic for treatment, because it's a threefold problem. We've needed diagnostics, we've needed a therapeutic to treat COVID once you have it, and then the vaccine to prevent it. And none of them have been viable to any 100% degree of complete accuracy. So what will, I lost my train of thought there. Let me pause. I'm having a COVID moment, I guess. And all this. What I'm trying to say is that the industry, unless, I mean, the whole thing collapses, I mean, the whole world as we know it, I mean, worst case scenario, will continue to be just going gangbusters, because their discoveries that they are making and the drugs they're producing and trying to produce and develop, it's out of a science fiction movie.
Yeah.
I mean,
you know, it's amazing. I mean, Annette, you know, it's odd that you would bring up the price control. We had a fellow by the name of Wayne. He was on from Pacific Research Institute. I'm sure you've heard of these folks.
Mm-hmm.
And, he was talking about supply chain. Anyway, we were talking, you know, with a patient focus, but he was saying that with these new biologics hitting, you know, because it turns out to be expensive therapy. He said essentially the healthcare system basis of repayment or payment is broken. He says, you know, in other words, if you're going to get a therapy that's several $100,000, the way the insurance works now just doesn't work anymore. It's broken. He says that whole thing has to be revisited. So,
well, you're exactly right on that, and that's why I threw that disclaimer, life as we know it.
Yeah.
Because this is the biggest, in all of the webinars and all of the discussions I've had throughout this, nobody really knows what's going on. I mean, we're rushing to produce a drug, a vaccine that we're going to make while it's still in the advanced clinical trials that haven't started yet, the late stage trials. So that's where we're at. My optimism hinges on an assumption that we will return to some sense of normalcy eventually, and that those things that need to be restructured will be. The government can't keep printing money. We know that. But we also know that if our systems that we have in place, insurance, that we still have people with insurance, again, that's an unknown, that yes, the industry will be strong. On the other hand, we need the pedestrian drugs.
yes.
We need them. So, and there are more people with access to medicine, as we discuss every year, than there ever has been. And that's, everybody's on the bandwagon now. I mean, so unless everybody runs out of money, which is a chance, and the whole world collapses, pharma, bio, the whole blanket will continue to be strong.
I agree. Well, while we're talking about it, it's good you brought that up. I mean, one of the ongoing discussions we have on the live session, as you know, is the biosimilar discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems every year, we run into another snag with this whole thing. I mean, right. What is your assessment there? I mean, the biosimilar market just doesn't seem to be catching hold.
A physician, it's one, you don't save as much as you do like with a typical generic. That's 65%, 75% less than the prescription branded drug. With biosimilars, it's not that much of a savings, maybe 20%, at the high end 35 for a drug that might be similar. Physicians are actually hesitant to prescribe a biosimilar. When I know this drug A works, my patient has the best shot on this. That key word in there, Russ, is similar. Now, Europe has embraced it much more than the United States has. So is India's going gangbusters in China, building plants to manufacture biosimilars. But it has not taken off in the US. And it's gotten kind of quiet through all of this with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
But where you have such a, our medical healthcare system, doctors, and it's a combination. Now, what some insurers are doing are making you try the lesser drug, the biosimilar, but then again, they're playing God with that. It's not like, try this antibiotic before I give you this one. This could kill somebody if it's not the right drug. So, yeah.
And what's your other sense too? I mean, we're talking about the industry and development. I mean, the amount of misinformation out there. I mean, these people talking about, in the 40 years that I've been in the industry, I haven't seen timelines on a clinical development like they're talking. It's insane. I mean,
Russ, it's crazy. It's crazy. And I'll tell you, I read what I read in the news and what I hear on the news. And I have been fortunate or unfortunate to be in some rather privileged web presentations with some of the same companies that are quoting, we're going to get this drug out in December, in January. That's not what I'm hearing from them. I mean, not really. They know you can't. You can't. I mean, it's, it probably better than I do. And it's, so there's a disjointedness between what we hear and read and what the actual companies are saying. but that's not the front that they're, I mean, it's
Yeah,
like full speed ahead. Like I said, we're just having a hard time diagnosing it at this point. So
yeah,
we're developing a vaccine against an illness that we're not quite sure about, that we have a hard time diagnosing, and that we don't know how to treat.
right,
Like Gilead's treatment, that was a price control problem where they said people that are on Medicare or Medicaid got it for $2,500 a dose or a treatment course, and people that were insured had to pay $3,500. That's what the insurance companies were charged. But that drug only increased, I mean, it gave you like 2 days less than being sick to some of the people that had COVID. So I
yeah.
don't know.
I get it. Well, let's change it up a little bit. Let's talk about the CARES Act and the effect that we're going to be on the outlook and capital expenditures and what are the government. Let's take a look at our old buddy, the government. What are the government directives are going to be? I mean, looks like they're putting money into where it needs to be, but I mean, let's try and put it in perspective. So, what this CARES Act? I mean, what do we got going on here?
Well, there's so many acronyms. I've always said follow the acronyms. That's where the money is. CARES, BARDA, um, Warp Speed. I mean, there's more coming. There's some I've left out. It's to secure the supply chain, basically. Now, what we thought would happen, what the biggest fear was, oh my God, our bulk, our APIs aren't going to come to the United. We're not going to be able to make our drugs. We're done. We're out. It did expose some of the weaknesses, but really nothing really missed a beat. And if you look within the documents of the CARES Act, and they're talking about reshoring and ensuring that we have adequate supplies here to supply the citizens of the United States, be it a drug, be it a medical device, be it a covering, personal PPE, personal protection equipment. But there's a little thing in there, and it's interesting, that includes overseas suppliers. So people that think, I thought that it was going to be, all right, X amount of stuff has to be manufactured in the United States for consumption in the United States. It's true to a point, but there is a backdoor allowing the companies still to rely on overseas suppliers for a lot of that. That's not to say that there won't be an uptick in activity in the United States, and that all the foreign companies that had already started coming here and buying up companies because of the increased FDA enforcement in China and in India. Right before COVID, well, in the midst of COVID, I can't think of the name right off the top of my head. GlaxoSmithKline's largest consumer products manufacturing plant, just outside of Toronto in Mississauga, was purchased by a Taiwanese company. And they're going to manufacture the GlaxoSmithKline products. The name you would never guess it's from Taiwan. And it was just stunning in the midst of all of this. I think the curbs are going to come on the foreign companies investing, the direct foreign investment, that you're going to have to employ X amount of citizens, that you're going to have to buy materials and do business in with North Americans.
No.
That's what I'm hearing more of.
Yeah, I mean, wasn't there? I mean, there was this outcry, the onshore, as they call it now. Everything.
Mhm.
It's I don't think people have a realistic look on that. I mean, you and I know that's not going to happen overnight either. But
No, it's not. But when there's so much money, Russ, and there's so much confusion out there. Now, who I'm pulling for, what region, I mean, it's good. There's activity on Long Island, there's activity in Jersey, there's activity in everywhere. And I love it. And it's not all biological manufacturing and development. It's everything. And I like seeing that. Who's trying to make a play, as they have been for so long, is Puerto Rico. they want to pick up some of this activity that's offshored. And they saying because the prices in China and India have gone up considerably, considerably. They're making a concerted effort with a proposal to say, bring us back. I mean, they've got the location is a double-edged sword. It's great for us, but it's bad for them because of the hurricanes. But they have rebuilt their infrastructure down there, and any places we've seen can fall victim to catastrophes. We're seeing that now. I think we will see expanded development of projects here and activity, but you're right, there's a back door out. They're not going to cut off, because at the end of the day, it's going to be about profit.
But I think your point is well made. I mean, we've seen that. Let's face it, Puerto Rico in the 80s and the early 90s, you driving down Route 30 between Caguas and Humacao, it was like driving down Route 3 in New Jersey. Every major pharmaceutical business was there.
Absolutely.
And we've seen that turn. Now the question really is okay, so the infrastructure's back. Is this going to? I looks like Puerto Rico's going to take their next shot. They're going to be the place to go again. Do you
They're
think
going to have to make some more favorable tax laws.
Yeah, that was going to be the next question. Do you see that coming?
They have to do it. They have to do it. It doesn't make sense. Why would someone have to go to Ireland, which is how Ireland, I mean, look how they blossomed after Puerto Rico's tax laws went away finally, all of it. And I think it's going to happen. There's so much else going on right now, but there's a lot of activity going on to that end right now, because they can sell that. They can sell Puerto Rico. Come on, it's part of us.
Yes.
And you know as well as I do, like I said, in many cases better, of the massive facilities down there and the manpower we have. They've spent a lot of money upgrading the intellectual capital. The schools down there are stunning. So I hope that they will benefit from this.
Let's hope. But you and I both know the talent goes where the business is. I mean,
that's right.
All the incredibly bright fellas we had working there, when the industry dried up, they came stateside.
Yeah, they're all here in the States. Yep. I talked to one a couple of weeks back, and he wants to go home.
Yeah.
We had a long discussion about it. And
maybe the time's right.
There's some activity down there, but not to the degree that it should be and could be. Right.
Well, let's put it in perspective. It's certainly not to the degree or the frenzy that it was in the 80s and in the early 90s. No.
Absolutely.
I think the embers are there, though.
They are, and they're not out. They're not out.
So let's just talk about this foreign investment. I mean, are we seeing this uptick big time? And we're not talking the global players now. I mean, let's be specific.
No, we're talking Arabundo. We're talking, I mean, there's so many different names and they're all intertwined. Some of them are getting more American names. It's kind of funny. There was one, I swear, I'm making this up because off the top of my head, like Sunshine Pharma. And it's like, wait a minute, wait just a minute. But what they're trying to do, we've still got a lot of empty plants, Russ. We've still got a lot of them. And I think it's a good thing for them to buy those and invest some money, because there is going to be a huge market for it's very easy to make generics. It's dirt cheap. When everybody was running around about, I'm going to mispronounce it, so I'll call it the anti-malarial drug. I know. Are you reporting on all those projects? Like, what are you talking about? It's like 3 cents to make that. They're going to change up the mix, and there you go. There's your wonder drug.
Annette, you're killing me when you say.
I mean, I'm like, oh, I can't report that project since it involved a guy flipping a couple of switches, I mean, but it's good because they do have to they do have to spend the money locally.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that for a second. I mean, and Puerto Rico aside, I mean, there's got to be an incredible amount of capital sitting out there falling apart. Okay.
Yeah.
Having said that, you were saying that, you know, people are jumping on. There's a 8 billion in projects. So what is it? Are they renovating? They doing green fields? They rebuild? What? Where's it all going? I mean,
Yes.
thanks for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
The brownfields are hot. They always have been in our industry. Whether now brownfield, we have to take it to, it's an existing building that they've
Right.
never had operations in. That's what we consider it. Grassroots expansions, they're going nuts. We came across a small project the other day. They bought a 90,000 square foot plant 3 years ago and only outfitted 16,000 square feet of it. Now they're going to take another 20,000 square feet and equip it. And they're a small company. It's a very small company. They have the capital. They're going to do it. It's got nothing to do with COVID. And what was interesting is they said we planned to do this before COVID, but if we can get on the COVID bandwagon, we're going to go for some of that money because they do happen to have a small fill and finish clinical scale.
Right.
So there's little projects and there's big projects, and it's everywhere. Here in Houston, the people that developed Cambridge and Boston, you know, those hallowed corridors of research centers, Lyme, Lyme development.
Mhm.
Well, years ago, they bought some acreage here in Houston on the 288 corridor from a little suburb called Pearland that leads right to the med center. The corridor of 288 goes straight to arguably the world's largest medical center. And they've just sat on that 100 acres. For 15 years, we'd call once a year. And as Lyme went through different owners and stopped, there was the same person, or maybe the same phone number. Yep, we're still here, just sitting on it. Well, now we're seeing that happen. Not from them, but from everybody else. Lonza spent $100 million down here on their viral vector facility. And now we're getting other plants coming in. And it's that they're making a play. And Houston's not known for being a hotbed for biological manufacturing. We've got Master Cell down here in Webster. So it's taken longer than I thought it would, but it's happening. And the demand is there. And don't forget our little friends, the cannabis. They overshot in many cases, but they're still consistently spending money. We read in the news like Aurora's having problems,
Mhm.
but they're in the mix. They're in the mix. The
You know, let me just say, I mean, you bring up Houston. I would have not, between you and me, wouldn't have called it on that one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But so where are we going? I mean, you mentioned Long Island. Obviously, we all know what's a hotbed out there. I mean, what about the ones we know are solid, like Jersey, New York, areas out there? You know, are these Michigan? I mean, are these places getting a jump start, or what do you think?
Yes, everybody's busy. I had a map, and let me take a little look. I can't show it, but I will tell you that it went from all the regions.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this was just 2 weeks ago. We've got New England, 4 billion going on. These are all future kickoff. Okay. They didn't start construction yet.
Right.
West Coast, 4 billion. Canada, 1.5 billion. Rocky Mountain area, 1 billion. Southwest, 2.8 billion. Southeast, 5. Mid-Atlantic, 4. Great Lakes, 3. It just shows that there's activity everywhere across every sector, research and manufacturing, and the distribution's become a hot button now to supply everybody. I mean, some of these things are going to go away. There was one project, this is just talking on a project level, when everything was coming for the masks or the ventilators. He almost went bust during the last big pandemic. He ran out and bought these, and I actually talked to the owner of the company, ran out and bought the machines. Well, he said, then it dried up and I'm in debt for the machines. He goes, so I've got an order for 4 times what I have capacity for. I'm only going to fill X amount of product. I'm not investing any more money because I'm not going to go under as a result of this. But otherwise, like I said, it was already booming, and there's not one area of the country where there's not activity, including Hamilton, Montana, with GSK's plant there. I mean, it's a $100 million project in Montana. So the REITs that I talked about, the real estate investment trusts, the whole West Coast, from Washington down to California, is crazy with investment, hundreds of millions of dollars. And they hope to land one just big tenant like they did with Merck out there, but or Abbott, AbbVie, but it doesn't have to be because everybody's clamoring for space. Some will survive, some won't. And that's up on the East Coast as well. And we're seeing some development in the Midwest where they're trying to start the same thing up. Cannabis companies are doing it. In Kalamazoo, I talked to the developer and they're building I go, wait a minute. So it's like an incubator? He said, no, we're going to provide everything, cultivation and processing for these smaller companies. And they pay us a rent and they can do it under their, he's got plans to take it across the nation to give the little guys a chance. So it's really, when I say interesting times we live in, it is kind of interesting beyond COVID. There's a lot of ingenuity going on and activity.
Well, yeah, you bring up a great point. I mean, we all are keen to see all these places start up, but let's talk about it in the practical reality of it. And that, I mean, who's going to be doing the supply chain stuff? I mean, let's face it, you and I know that that's a subset of the industry that's going to be going wild now. I mean, where do you see, I mean, do you have a sense of what people are doing? There's got to be guys focusing on supply chain as it is, all by itself.
There's entire divisions devoted to that. I haven't gotten a good handle on it, Russ, because the more things change, the more they stay the same. I haven't heard anything that's like, wow, that's going to really make a difference. That's okay. That's a positive action. Everything is like business as usual. It's very strange, except for operational, like within the facilities. I haven't, and I mean, that's from all my researchers, including my lead here in North America. People are working, like I'm saying, I'm not talking operational, but like you said, supply chain. No, I'm not saying it's not going to change. There's a lot of hubbub about it, but there's been no viable changes. There will be. There almost has to be. People or companies and governments. You've got the government involved in this now, and I think they're waiting. Well, no, they're not waiting. Here's what they're doing. They're trying to operate under ungodly circumstances because half the plants don't have staff back in except for essential personnel. Everybody's working. Some companies are working just with cell phones, with all their office staffs off. You can't make deliveries. Those are the challenges they're having to deal with right now, to get their product so they can make their product. That's the main concern before they go even further on where they're sourcing on their supply chain. There's operational problems right now. That change.
But let's face it. I mean, I'm an optimist. I mean, to me, that's what we're looking at now. I,
Right.
yeah, it's going to be different, but when we get back to what considered relatively regular or normal,
Mhm.
the supply chain is going to be key. I mean, let's face it. You keep talking. You spoke about Montana. You know what it's like getting. You know what I mean? That's
Right.
right. I mean, you and I know the supply chain to Puerto Rico is something that was the longest one and the most difficult one we had. Right?
Right.
Cost of goods used to get driven. The only thing that saved us there was the tax incentive.
Exactly.
So I mean, yeah, there's the here and now. I can't
Yeah.
get into work, but then there's got to be somebody saying, okay, once we really kick off with all this investment, how are we going to address these things?
Right. And they're not at that stage yet. Like I said, there's entire teams and think tanks working because it's a shift for the industry. The whole operational strategy, be it plant operations to supply chain, it's all changing. It has to, because we will have a new normal, but I'm an optimist like you. Things will get back to a sense of normalcy, and they will have to have issues in place. Now, I know that closing the loop, so to speak, is vital, both in the whole loop. I mean, when you're talking about the development of a drug all the way to you taking it.
Right.
The same applies for manufacturing. We know that in the development. Um, as they get it in place and things calm down a little bit, that is going to help sustain. That's what the CARES Act was supposed to address, but it was more of a fanfare. It's just there's no viable answers at this time because I could say, well, here's what I think is going to happen, but I don't know
Mm.
because I get like 3 different fields of study on which way are you going. I will say that automation and closing that loop and actually using less personnel is coming. Because think about it. I need this, we need this drug. This is our top seller. We can't let this show the underbelly of the industry and the vulnerabilities of producing the actual drug. And it's already highly automated. It's just going to get more so. The less people needed inside the facility to produce any part of the product is been ongoing, and it's going to be more so. And then you take the advent of AI,
Hmm.
the crunch, it can't replace people at this point, but it can take tens of thousands of documents in a microscopic amount of time and say, here's our conclusion. Here's what we think you could do, and save untold. So all of these things are coming into play. There's just too much going on right now, but I can't answer to where I think how they're going to address the supply chain at this point.
But I agree with you. I mean, I think one of the things that we're going to see a lot of is the actual reality applications. The man in the plant is going to be, that's just it. It's going to be a man in the plant, and perhaps your experts are going to be remote.
Yep.
It becomes their eyes and ears. We've been talking about this for the longest time. And
Right.
so maybe this is the jump start we've been waiting on. We're thinking about, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're proving that it can work. It can work. And I know, again, another recent project that we just reported, um, the guy was laughing because he said, well, the local news had something about it and they were talking about what a boon for the community. He goes, it's a boon for those of us that that are employed, but there's no new employees coming, excuse me, as a result of this. And it's a boon for vendors, but that that employee count wasn't budging
Yeah.
because it's just locking it in and hooking it up, so to speak. So, but there is, I don't want to be negative,
No.
and I don't. feel negative. I just feel a little guilty going, wow, the industry is doing really good. It's going to keep going. I mean, because that's tempered by, oh my goodness, this is a horrible pandemic we're in. But it is going good.
Yes.
It is active. They have gotten a lot, boy, if it was tough to get pharma projects before COVID, now that they're under the spotlight, they're really enforcing those non-disclosure agreements, even more so. It's much more difficult to obtain information for our projects, but we're still able to.
Right.
But it's they're under a lot of scrutiny as they're getting all of this money and activity, and some of the companies are going to go by the wayside. We know that already. The little ones, they'll get bought. I think it's pretty amazing watching the drug majors all partner up. They're fighting, but then they partner, and we'll see more of that. It works.
Yeah, no, the partnering part, I have to agree with you. It's ironic that you would bring that up. We had an earlier panel discussion on radioisotopes and that whole sector of the industry. And we're talking about pharmaceutical companies partnering up with power suppliers and access to reactors. And so, I mean, it's all out there.
Well, you're exactly right. And it's kind of cool that people are throwing out ideas and some of them are making sense. And it's bringing partners that you'd never put together. I am seeing a lot of traction from other industries that maybe didn't deal with the pharmaceutical industry, pharma bio industry. And as other sectors have gotten quieter and undergone just horrible shifts right now, that are looking to the industry for growth for their company or to sustain their business. Like, all right, I sell this to this industry sector. How will this apply to the pharma industry? Can I do the same thing? Is a valve a valve? So it's getting a lot of attention and there's a lot of activity. I hope it continues. For now, I mean, there's people that are whiteboarding projects for 2025. I call that optimistic.
When you think about our development time, I mean, COVID vaccines aside, we're talking.
Come on.
Yeah,
Nope.
we're talking 3 to 4 year cycle here, So my favorite part of this panel discussion. So when we're sitting together in April of 2021 in New York City at the Javits Center, Annette, where are we going to be? What's the industry going to look like? What are you thinking?
I think it's going to be good. I think that I'm not going to say we'll have a vaccine. I think we'll all have learned how to adapt, and that by its very nature, Russ, it's going to survive. It's still going to be big bad pharma to a lot of people, but it actually saves a lot of people's lives. Aside from COVID, in the midst of all this, there are some wonderful things being done within the industry that are curing people or allowing them to live that it never could before, and there's not really a price you can put on that. I think that we'll have new players, and I mean from serving the industry, coming to the industry what you brought up, power and pharma companies. Well, people, let's say they service power, or I don't want to call out other sectors, but they're looking, saying this is kind of drying up over here. And I don't think they're going to want to go away, because as well as I do, there's a lot of money in pharma and a lot of opportunities. If you can jump through the hoops, and I always say you just have to meet the requirements once. Once I had spoken with someone and they were just worried about expanding across the United States, and I go, well, give me some background. Who have you done work with? Well, just Amgen and AbbVie. I go, oh my goodness, is this recent? They were new to the industry, and I go, well, for heaven's sakes, there's more to go on from that, and they had nothing to do with pharma prior to 2 years ago. So that's interesting. We're seeing a big shift of new players in the field. that want to service the industry and come along on the ride. But I think when we meet next April, we're all going to be in a little better place and understand more of what we've been fighting. I'm hoping that we'll have a therapeutic to treat this thing and a better understanding of how to do. I won't be able to hug you, but we will give a fist bump or something to each other. It's hard for me because I'm a very physical, friendly person, but I hope this was of help to people and just giving them an idea of kind of where we're at right now.
Well, it's always helpful in that. I mean, the little gems that fall out are there. If we were sitting at the Crystal Palace at the Javits Center, you and I both know this would be when we open up the question is when you get accosted, and we have to get security to move people on so we can get to the next panel.
You're too kind. You're too kind. I love this industry. I love it.
Yeah, it's been good to me too. And on that, like I said 3 times anyway. So we're gonna call this a day, and it's always a pleasure in that.